Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, December 11th. First up, we take a look at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. We see an area of seas off of Oregon, basically fading and of no real interest. This previously, from a not even quite a gale low pressure system, has generated small swell pushing into central and North California, but of no real interest. Of more interest, off the Kuril Islands, a gale is taking shape, generating 22-foot seas, and a little bit more is expected from it. Let's get into the details. We'll start our tour looking at jet stream level winds. As usual, these winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When those gales do form, it helps direct their track. We have an area of some interest off of the Kuril Islands, Japan, winds to 200 knots, creating almost a little bit of a trough. This is a dip in the jet stream right here. That helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. Of course, low pressure generates wind, winds generate seas, seas generate swell as they radiate away from the fetch area, and of course create surf when it hits your beach. So, we have a bit of a trough here off the Kuril Islands, and this has been a semi-permanent thing for the past 2 weeks or so now, but of big, bad concern is this split in the jet right here. Actually, this split was more over the dateline. It's pushing east a little bit here as of tonight, and some energy, you can see actually remnant energy up here on the top of the chart. It's been pushing up here on the dateline, way up in north of the Bering Sea, and then crashing back down in and pushing into the U.S. West Coast here. The southern branch of the jet is tracking down almost down to 10 north, way south of even Hawaii, and then looping back up, reconsolidating off the U.S. West Coast. This is making for some weather here into the Pacific Northwest. Potential for storms off of the Kuril Islands, and nothing in between, just dead air, brick wall, just completely shutting down any ability for storms to migrate from the west to the east. Let's put this into motion. As we move into Monday, you can see the split even more pronounced. Decent little trough here. This is what's supporting low pressure down at the surface right now on Monday. And that system continues to the east into Tuesday and then starts pushing north of the Kuril Islands. Notice winds building here. Also notice here's your split right here. Winds coming up north and then almost immediately coming right back down. A little bit of a trough trying to organize here Tuesday night. But as we move further out here, an interesting pattern will start to develop. Notice there's more wind energy building in the jet again come Wednesday night into Thursday. Another trough starting to take shape. Notice the big split here. A little bit of a backdoor trough coming off of the Pacific Northwest. Mainly good, mainly for weather more so than anything. Healthy jet stream flow pushing into California, likely ushering in a fair amount of weather. And the jet just starts building more come Friday. What is this? 1, 2, 3. That's 160 knot winds. Notice the split point is making it into, where would this be? Oh, the Western Gulf, let's say. And winds continue building in the jet, just driving the split point further to the east. 190 knot winds on Saturday night coming over the dateline. The split point is somewhere here now in almost the central Gulf of Alaska. And then you get into Sunday, midday Sunday, and it almost looks like the split pattern is all but gone by then, with a broad trough-like structure covering the whole northern half of the Pacific Ocean. That's 180 hours out. A little bit of a split here in the jet, but see what's happening here is the thought is the active phase of the MJO is starting to develop down there. That's infusing energy into the jet, and all of a sudden things come back to life where we are right now. The inactive phase of the MJO is somewhere down here, and that just always stomps on the jet stream, causes it to split. So the good news is it looks like a more active pattern is setting up. Let's go take a look down at the surface. So here we are, surface level pressure, surface level winds. As expected, last little bit of low pressure trying to push into the Pacific Northwest. No real fetch associated with it. Cut off low, trying to organize here north of Hawaii. High pressure, sort of building into, let's say, Central California and Southern California. But the big weather feature, and it's not even that big, low pressure over the Kuril Islands, generating 30-35 knot fetch, aimed somewhat at Hawaii, generating some seas. We'll just roll this out into Monday. Fetch gets a little bit more defined, a little tiny pocket of 40 knot winds. That's not impressive, but it's a start. Getting traction on the ocean surface. Then you get into Monday night, a large fetch of 30 knot winds. It's good for about 12-second period swell with 35 knot winds embedded in that, so some 13-second period reaching from the Kuril Islands to the date line. All this fetch here, stronger, pushing due north, doing nothing for anyone. Cutoff low continues north of Hawaii. Roll this out some more. That low continues into Tuesday and starts lifting north. But then things start getting interesting come, let's say, Wednesday morning. A storm, yes, gale. Oh, there's a little tiny area, maybe a 55 knot winds, pockets of 50 knot winds, pushing off Japan. Remember, the jet stream's getting stronger there, continuing into Wednesday evening. Now, look, underneath this tag here, there is 55 knot winds. Now, this is mainly aimed at the U.S. West Coast. The Great Circle track goes up like this and down like this into California or so until we get into, well, here we go, Thursday, and it finally pushes up into the Bering Sea Thursday night, early Friday, and that system shuts down. Notice high pressure here in the Gulf of Alaska. That's where the split point is, and north winds, and it looks like, if anything, precipitation and kind of a mess moving into California. We'll roll this out again. Then another low pressure pushes off Japan, starts tapping moisture from the previous low, and starts dramatically building come Saturday. It looks like there's maybe some 55 knot, there we go, 55, you can almost see it, 60 knot winds in there. That's almost hurricane force on the date line. Pretty well to the north, continuing into Sunday morning, moving into the Gulf of Alaska. So this would be a rather north-angled swell relative to California. Probably for Northern California, that's in the 304, 305, up into the 310 degree range. Still, it's a lot better than where we've been, and this just showed up on the models this morning. It's been through 3 runs now, the 06Z, the 12Z, and now the 18Z run, suggesting that at least something is going to break free, and we might get some swell activity, certainly for Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast, if all this comes to pass. Kind of hard to say exactly how it's all going to play out because it's still a good whiles away. Let's go take a look at the wave models. So here we are again. What is that, 22 foot seas? Oh, it says 23, but basically we'll give it 22 right there off of northern Japan. Building some as we move into Tuesday, a broader area of 23-foot seas, certainly aimed well at Hawaii, maybe even some energy for the U.S. West Coast. That'd probably be 14, maybe 15-second period energy, lifting north into Wednesday and fading out as it moves into the Bering Sea. But here comes the first real system of interest on Wednesday, so that's only 2.5 days out. That's not so far. Seas building rapidly to 44 feet. And then we see, what do we have here? 50-foot seas on Thursday morning. Again, kind of pushing northeast, not so great for Hawaii, but one can say it's on the Great Circle Pass, mainly for central North California up into Oregon. And what do we have? Still 50-foot seas before it impacts the Aleutian Islands on the dateline. We'll call this the North Dateline region. Late Thursday night, and it starts fading out. But then system number 2 queues up right behind it. Comes Saturday, seas rapidly building again, 46.8 feet, basically 47. This is 48 feet on Sunday sometime, tracking through the North Gulf. Oops, and that was the end of that. We run out of the model run. Certainly this is probably both these systems are probably well overhyped by the model, but you know what? We've been through a better part of 2 or 3 weeks with really nothing of any interest on the charts, so we'll take it. This looks good. It's a nice tease and a nice step in the right direction. Just to give you a little hint of what's going on, we're also working on buoy charts. This is buoys for the entire U.S. West Coast from up in the Gulf of Alaska down into the south end of California. Not every buoy, but a good mix of the CDIP and NOAA buoys. The CDIP buoys updating every half hour. Again, we have a little graph here, calculated surf height, prime swell height and period, secondary swell height and period, and of course directions. And then we also, of course, have your standard seas, and then another chop height. This is energy 5 seconds or less calculated and which direction it's come from if we have the directional data. We're working on this. We should be able to start posting this rather soon, probably in the next couple of days or so, and we'll put some note of that on the site. But anyway, you can just scan down here, and basically the green bars suggest surf heights of less than 10 feet. Things are pretty small up and down the coast right now, but we think that will be short-lived. And a quick look at the precipitation forecast. California is what we're mainly interested here. And current Sunday night, things are drying out. Not a whole lot going on. A good amount of rain pulled into California. Certainly the San Francisco Bay Area, better part of 2 inches over the past 5 days or so. Snow-wise, not a whole lot. Snow levels were up about 8,200 feet. Most of the good snow. Kirkwood, I think, did okay. They were reporting 18 inches as of Sunday morning. Everywhere else, pretty much nothing. It was rain all the way to the top or close to the top of most resorts. Anyway, we move in. Cutoff low is forecast Monday off the coast, trying to develop. Starts working its way into the San Francisco Bay Area and the Tahoe region. Light snow up high is the expectation, continuing all day Wednesday, then lifting a bit north. Then a broader low develops off the coast on Thursday, moves in Thursday morning. Heavy precipitation. Suspect the, now notice, there is this connection here. Hawaii cutoff low here. We wouldn't call it a pineapple express, but it's a tropical connection, so that tends to mean higher snow levels. We'll see. Looks like a good amount of snow possible come Thursday, Friday, into all of the Sierras. Significant amounts. Some of the other charts we've seen have been suggesting 60 inches or more. Again, this is kind of way out in the future. Continuing, finally lightening up on Saturday, and then things drying out. Now, most resorts don't have a whole lot of their runs open. It's mainly the greens and blues since it's early in the season. The depths are rather shallow snow depths. But if the system materializes as expected, they get the dump they expect, that should be enough to start opening some of the more difficult runs at the better resorts. So something to look forward to there as well. So let's take a look out a little bit longer, see what's going on, specifically how the MJO is affecting the storm track, what changes are coming, and what's going on with La Niña. First off, we're looking for the presence of the MJO. One way we do that, that's the Madden-Julian Oscillation. We're looking on the equator, West Pacific here, East Pacific here, Papua New Guinea here, date line roughly here. 5 degrees north and south of the equator, we see east winds. Actual winds based on the TAO buoy array. This is 5-day mean, so it's not actually it's sort of an average over the 5 days. Certainly trades in control, but notice here, in the Kelvin wave generation area, that is from 135 east to about 170 west, 5 degrees north to south. Draw a box right here. See east winds, but then you get deeper into it. We actually see some westerly anomalies and dead winds. That is certainly a sign. If it was all east winds, as it has been across this whole area, for weeks now, that's the indicative of the inactive phase of the Madden-Julian Oscillation. The inactive phase, as we discussed before, tends to split the jet stream, tends to stomp on the storm track, reduce the amount of storms capable of producing surf, and also tends to dry out things on the U.S. West Coast when it moves south of California. Looking at anomalies, differences in normal this time of year, we see just these winds, they're east, but that's pretty much normal for this time of year. But in the Kelvin wave generation area, the main area we monitor, notice little bits of westerly anomalies starting to show up, certainly not easterly anomalies. Again, an indicator that the active phase of the MJO is in control, and the active phase, unlike the inactive phase, actually helps impart energy to the jet stream, helps goose up the storm track, create more storms, which create swell, which also create precipitation when it moves south of California. The forecast, we can actually go backwards in time here. This is the whole planet on one chart. The date line is right here. 120 east is here. The Kelvin wave generation area is basically between these two tick marks. Blues are easterly anomalies. That's the inactive phase of the MJO. Reds are the active phase. Here we are right now, current time. You can see a preponderance for the past couple of weeks of easterly anomalies. One little pocket of westerly anomalies here last week. Current situation, weak easterly anomalies on the date line, and as you work your way down, building westerly anomalies, not strong. Most of the westerly anomalies are here in the Indian Ocean. That's typical of La Niña. Last year, these westerly anomalies were in the Kelvin wave generation area, of course, generating Kelvin waves, which is pockets of warm water traveling east, impacting the Galapagos in that area. Now we're in the opposite mode during La Niña, easterly anomalies prevalent, but still, you can see little hints that the active phase of the MJO might be building in over the next week. Next up, we'll take a look at outgoing long wave radiation models. These suggest where you see this is more sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface, high pressure, indicative. There's your more positive numbers, suggesting the inactive phase of the MJO. This here, the blues, less sunlight reflectivity, more clouds, low pressure, the active phase of the MJO. The forecast for the next week suggests the inactive phase of the MJO fading and the active phase moving from the Indian Ocean into the far west Pacific. If that's true, that's 2 weeks out. That suggests we're just starting to get warmed up here, and typically the MJO takes about 4 weeks to traverse either phase from here to here, so we potentially have a 4-week run starting maybe as early as a week out. So that's good news. This, the GEFS model, and GFS ensemble model, predicts some variation on the same thing, not exactly alike, but again, it too is suggesting the active phase is to move into the far west Pacific 2 weeks out. Now, the phase diagram charts is another way of looking at the active phase of the MJO. Right here, the big dot is where the active phase of the MJO is. This, assume you're looking down on the North Pole. The active phase moves counterclockwise around the chart, or from west to east from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, over the dateline into the West Pacific, under the U.S., into the Atlantic, over on top of Africa and back to the Indian Ocean, makes this trek the whole way around relative to the Pacific Ocean. 4 weeks in one phase, then followed by 4 weeks in the opposite phase. The active phase is supposedly in over the Maritime Continent and going to work its way into the West Pacific, but if it's inside this circle, that means it's very weak, so not a strong signal. That's exactly what the previous charts were suggesting too. This, the GEFS model, shows some variation on the same thing, basically weak, moving to the west. And our final model, the CFS model, this is great for seeing where the MJO is and what's going on wind-wise. So currently, this, again, past history is down on the bottom. This is current, and this is the future forecast. The area we're interested between, let's say, these two tick marks going up. So we're looking for westerly anomalies, or oranges or yellows here. We see a little bit of it. You know, really what we're seeing, here's the date line running right up here, and what we're seeing is not a whole lot of blues, and that's more important. Here, we'll do the overlay. Inactive phase of the MJO right here, the dotted contour, fading out in a week, let's say, and then another sort of iteration of it supposedly developing, but very, very weak. And you just kind of look at this pattern and you go, the active phase is weak, the inactive phase is weak, not a whole lot going on. The good news is we're not seeing a whole lot of blue, or what we are seeing is right on the date line, but further in the West Pacific, it's neutral or lightly west anomalies, not a strong MJO pattern forecast. And here's just a quick look at and here's 2016, January 2016, of the strength of the active phase of the MJO. You can see here's where we are right now. The interesting part we're trying to suggest here is this little line. It was actually down somewhere in here a week ago, suggesting the inactive phase of the MJO. Notice it's retreated now to neutral, suggesting maybe we're going to get another little pulse of the active phase as we move into the week or two ahead. But generally, you can look here from April, the active phases of the MJO have tended to be pretty weak compared to back last year this time in the springtime, let's say, and summer of 2015, when El Nino was strong, active phase was enhanced significantly. During La Niña, the active phase is cut basically in half or more, and that is pretty normal. We are in La Niña. So let's talk a little bit about La Niña. We first start by looking at subsurface temperatures, West Pacific here, East Pacific here, same TAO buoy array. The X's are sensors on the anchor strings of the TAO buoy array strung across the equator, across the Pacific Ocean. And what you see here is warm temperatures in the west, a very shallow warm pool in the east. This is pretty typical of La Niña. But looking at depth, anomalies, difference from normal for this time of year. Now, the chart what we're seeing is, of course, warmer anomalies, 1 degree above normal in the west. Pretty typical because you have trades blowing harder than normal, taking warm surface water that was here, pushing it off into the West Pacific. But of way more interest is this was full of 2 and 3 degree below normal temperatures at depth a couple of weeks ago, and it's been steadily weakening. And notice we're almost into a normal temperature regime. Yes, we're a little bit below normal. We're not even 1 degree below normal here, just one little pocket off here in the east, suggesting that La Niña is in fact weakening. This other chart here, basically the same sort of data, depicted differently, not nearly as generous, but still, compared to what it was a couple of weeks ago, also suggesting that temperatures are warming in the east and that La Niña does not have as much of a footing as it did. Upper ocean heat anomaly data, upper 300 meters of the Pacific Ocean, West Pacific here, East Pacific here. We're back in January 2016, the last of El Nino. Warm temps in the east fading out. La Niña comes in, cool water in the May-June timeframe of this year. But what you see here too is this is typical of La Niña, cool water at depth. But then we got into mid-November, and all of a sudden you see temperatures starting to warm up, basically just not even a half degree below normal. And this, we're hoping, is going to continue to work its way to the east, and basically all this cool water will eventually be gone, let's say a couple months out or so. For this to be happening in December, typically when La Niña really gets going, it's in the January-February time frame, and if anything, La Niña looks like it's fading much earlier and much weaker than was expected. Next up, surface temperature, sea surface temperature data. So the main area for monitoring El Nino, La Niña is out here, 120 west and east of there out to about 170. And as we see here, definitely cool water, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, but not exceptionally cool. We're talking, what is that, maybe a half a degree or so, with some cooler pockets down, a degree or so, but not very much. What we're also really interested in here is what's going on off of Peru. We see just a little bit of cool water right along the coast, but mainly just very warm signature off the coast of Peru up into Ecuador. This whole area a week ago was much cooler. Those temperatures are starting to warm up again. Warm temperatures taking control. This is a good sign. And just a thin little stream extending from the Galapagos to the west. Basically, La Niña, we thought it was building here in the east, but it sure doesn't look like it now, according to this. The 7-day trend, you can see the same thing. Warming off of Peru, much warming here off of Ecuador to the Galapagos. And then we have this standard pattern of cool, warm, sort of oscillating pattern. But again, that too is much weaker than it has been. Now, we're not suggesting anything like El Nino or anything is going on here, but what we're seeing is the demise, it appears to be the demise of La Niña, or at least a warm pulse that is severely impeding its growth. And the high-res overview shows much the same. Warming off of Peru. This is actual differences normal for this time of year. And warming off of Ecuador. So the Niña 1.2 region right in here, just not in play at all. Now we do have our standard cool pool right in here, but this is not expansive, not strong, not impressive by any stretch of the imagination. And most of the width is right out here from the date line to, let's say, a point. There's Hawaii, so that region, that's where the split is right now in the jet. That's we're not going to attribute that to this, though it might be sort of enhanced by it a little bit. That's mainly just due to the inactive phase of the MJO interacting with La Niña, so making a bit of a brick wall split, but it doesn't seem to be taking much. There's a lot of warmth out here, a little bit of a positive shove from the active phase of the MJO, and the jet might be back in business. Now, what we're really interested in is the effect of La Niña and the MJO. These are two oscillations that interact with one another. La Niña or El Nino can last for 2-3 years at a time. The MJO is a much shorter cycle, running only, as we said, 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks over the Pacific Ocean at any point in time. So they can either help enhance each other or cancel each other out. Inactive phase during an El Nino year can sort of dampen the energy of El Nino. The inactive phase of the MJO during a La Nina year can actually enhance La Nina, and then the exact opposite is true. When the active phase of the MJO pulls in during a La Nina, it can actually dampen or sort of snuff out La Nina, at least periodically or temporarily. Anyway, so Southern Oscillation Index, differences in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. When you see negative numbers, this is the daily index. That suggests the active phase of the MJO. Positive numbers suggest the inactive phase of the MJO. What we're seeing right now is kind of a weekly positive, but just, again, like what we see in everything else, nothing really strong one way or the other. Now, here is the 30-day running average. There's a lot of noise in the daily numbers. 30-day average sort of gives you a broader hint of what's going on. We see here we went down to minus 5.4 in November. That was the active phase of the MJO, and then notice it's been steadily coming up, and now still coming up to about 0.5, suggesting that the inactive phase of the MJO has been in control. And the 90-day running average, which you use to really sort of monitor La Nina or El Nino, positive numbers suggest La Nina. And notice the numbers are slowly creeping their way down, suggesting that La Nina is getting weaker. One other index we look at is the ESPI index. So it's very much like the Southern Oscillation Index, only it measures differences in total precipitation between the area north of Darwin, Australia, and then the broad area in the equatorial Pacific. Negative numbers suggest drier in this region. Positive numbers suggest wetter in this region. We want to see positive numbers. That tells you you're in El Nino, and then that would be better for storm production and swell production in the Pacific and winter months. But we're in La Nina, and minus 1.17 is the current value. I think it was, it had actually risen to about minus 0.83 or 89 or something like that a week or two ago. And now it's sort of falling back a little bit, suggesting drier in this area. And that's to be expected, especially with the inactive phase of the MJO in control right now. It's sort of working in conjunction with La Nina and drying things out in this region. But still, considering precipitation in California and the swell pattern so far this year, hangover from El Nino is still guiding a little bit, and then there's a whole discussion of whether the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is a 20 to 30 year cycle, is sort of having an impact as well. We're not going to get into that this evening. We've talked about it in previous discussions. So to wrap things up real quick, kind of a quiet storm pattern in play right now in terms of swell production. Two significant systems forecast on the charts, significant in that they're strong, 45 plus foot seas forecast from both. None of it's believable yet, but it certainly is a step in the right direction. Models also suggest the active phase of the MJO is to start moving into the West Pacific about a week to 2 weeks out, so that all makes sort of sense. Long term we see, long term we see, yes, La Nina still in control, but slowly losing its grip over time. So in general, things are pretty good, and more precipitation. The question is, how high will the snow levels be as we get into this next series of storms for Central and North California? We'll see, but precipitation is precipitation. Bring it on any way you can get it to, at a minimum, help fill the reservoirs and give us some relief and some backup for the summer when things get dry. So the general pattern this week is looking much more favorable than it has in the past too. So that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week, same time, same channel. Have fun. Bye-bye.